Hello parents, in this video I'm going to be talking about how to homeschool while working full-time. My name is Felicia Wright. I'm a family education consultant and I help families make empowered educational decisions for their children. So let's hop into how do you do this while working full-time. I've talked to a lot of parents that are pulling out their kids and are interested in homeschooling for a variety of reasons, but most parents work, so parents are asking, well, how do I do this? So I want to go over some tips to keep in mind to homeschool while working full-time. So I've got 6 tips for you, so let's get into it. The first one is to be mindful of your time. What does your schedule even look like? So my husband right now, he works early morning to afternoon 410s. Once upon a time, he used to work night shift. I've worked in the morning, I've worked midday. So you have to think about what does your schedule look like and how can you fit it in? Because if you are following somebody else's idea of how you should homeschool, but that doesn't factor in your time, then it's not going to work for you. So you have to think about, when do I have time to do this? And I would suggest sitting down and writing it out and creating a block schedule, which leads me to the second point, which is schedule. So you want to sit down and schedule out your time, schedule out your days, because it's so easy to get off track. Even as an educator, I've been in the classroom and being at home, it's a different beast. And I get off track all the time if I'm not writing things down and figuring out, okay, when am I gonna teach this? When am I gonna do this? When am I gonna do that? So sit down and write out your schedule. And I also want to point out that if you're thinking that school for you at home has to be 6 hours a day, 5 days a week, I want to let you know and bust that myth. You do not have to do that much because it's just you and your child or children, and it does not take that long. If you want to homeschool 3 days a week, you can definitely do that effectively. So sitting down and looking at everything that you have, it'll really help you. The next point I want to make is you have to be efficient with your time. So again, going back to that scheduling, if you have a clear-cut view of what you're going to be doing each day, it's going to make you efficient. You want to stick to your plan and you will get through so much more. And as an educator, I've worked with hundreds of students. I can tell you the reason why homeschoolers can get through more content quicker than we do in the classroom is because in a classroom, for example, when I taught first grade, I had 25 kids in any given year, a first grade classroom, more in other grades. And when you're dealing with 25 kids, you give the lesson and then you have at least 6 questions. So then you're answering 6 questions. And then you give them independent work, and then you have more questions and you're hopping from person to person. And then next thing you know, the block of 45 minutes for that assignment is over and you have to move on to the next one. And that's why it takes us in the classroom 3 to 4 days to get through some content sometimes, because there'll be questions or some kids didn't get it. So you have to hop back and forth and make sure the entire classroom understands. You don't have to do that at home. You have 1 or 2 children, maybe a couple more, but you give the lesson, your child has a question, you answer it on the spot, they do their work independently, boom, it's done. So when a lot of people say, oh, I don't have time to homeschool, that just simply isn't true, because you have 1, 2, maybe 3 children. Your process is going to be way faster than somebody in a classroom. So if you're thinking you need all these hours to do it, I can tell you right now, you do not need all these hours to do it. That's the traditional school system, and there's a lot of kids and only 1 teacher in the classroom. So that's why that's where that thinking has come from. The next point I want to make is independent work. So if you're running short on time, think about when your kids can do independent work. So for example, you typically will give a lesson, you'll do some group work, and then you give them independent work. As a teacher, we call that I do, we do, you do. So I do it first, I show you the lesson, we do a lesson together, and then you do it on your own. So if you're tight on time, you want to, with your kids, I almost said students, I'm so saying students, with your child, you want to do one together, do something, you show them, do it together. And if you're tight on time, the independent work that they do on their own, they can do that while you're at work. So when you're at work, wherever your kids are with a spouse that maybe doesn't handle the homeschooling, that's when they can do their independent work. And then when you come back, check independent work, move on to the next lesson. Because that work doesn't necessarily have to be done with you. Maybe sometimes if it's a really hard lesson, you might want to do it with them. But for the most part, they can do that on their own during their time. So that also frees up some time for you to get things done. The next part I want to talk about that will help you homeschool while working full-time is use a curriculum. It is hard putting a curriculum together as a parent, even as a teacher. I taught in the state of Nevada, and we didn't have set curriculums for most of the subjects we taught. We, and by we, I mean like me and like my group of teachers that we worked with, like the whole 4th grade team or the whole 1st grade team, we would come together and make up lessons to teach the kids, and we'd all share these lessons. Now, it can be done, it's just very time consuming. And not being an experienced educator, it can be very overwhelming as well. Even as an educator, it can be overwhelming. Like one teacher would take reading, another teacher would take math. So we all work together, but if you're at home, I would suggest using a curriculum because everything is laid out for you. And it also has a pacing guide, and it'll help you schedule out everything that you need to know. That way you're not leaving gaps, which happens sometimes. I mean, even in the classroom, sometimes gaps happen. And what I mean by gaps is you leave some things out. So it can be difficult, but it doesn't have to be that difficult. I would suggest using a curriculum if you're working full-time and you want to homeschool. The next thing I want to talk about is don't be afraid to experiment and be flexible. Being flexible is so important because, again, you're working full-time and maybe something comes up and you have to go into work. Or, for example, in our household, my husband, he had to leave the state. He travels for work occasionally, and he was gone for a week. So it was just me all by myself managing the house. So that can be difficult sometimes. So it's okay to be flexible. And I just want to remind you that you're not in competition, or it's not a race to keep up with the public school system or whoever. And I say that only because, like, even for myself, I'm like, well, are they on track? Are they a typical whatever, 1st grader, 2nd grader, 3rd grader, or whatever? And there is no typical 2nd grader. There's skills that 2nd graders typically should learn, but when you're teaching on your own, you move at your child's pace and making sure that they understand all the information that they receive. So I hope that was helpful for you. Remember that you can do this if you're working full-time and want to homeschool. You can definitely do this. You just have to experiment and figure out what works for you. If you need help, hit up my comments, my links in the comments below. I have some resources and ways to contact me so I can help you. So I hope that was helpful. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will catch you on the next video. Bye.